Have you got a sense of humour, Harold?
Yeah, I am, but I'm thinking a little bit further back. You know, that might have been 50 years ago, Danny, but I'm thinking 164 years ago today.
Tell us about this yarn, because this is about the history of Ipswich, the 28th of November, 1857, and there's so many characters that lived in this city.
Yeah, that's right. And the Ipswich history is just amazing, even on a slow news day. And I'll tell you about that one day back in 1857. It was in the Moreton Bay Courier, the Ipswich news column started, and I quote, "In respect of the news, the past week has been remarkably dull."
Right.
Now, the man responsible for this story was the editor of the Moreton Bay Courier, Mr. William Charles Wilkes. Now, he was a convict who in 1833 had been transported for life for stealing. With his descriptive literary skills, Wilkes was said to be a combination of novelist Charles Dickens and a Dickens character who claimed he didn't understand human relationships but understood them very well. So I suspect that when Wilkes wrote that article, that dull Ipswich story, he knew exactly what he was doing, because he would have got everyone in Ipswich reading. So,
right.
And actually, by the way, Wilkes was a champion of the separation of Moreton Bay from New South Wales. So he was a great Queenslander.
Wow, and a convict.
There, that's right. Now, in Wilkes' column that day, he reported on a political rally here in Ipswich for Mr. Patrick Leslie, who was nominated for the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, because Queensland didn't exist back then, of course. Now, Wilkes wrote, and again I quote, "Mr. Leslie is not much of a speaker. His style is much disfigured by frequent use of irreverent and slang terms. So then, in other words, his language was a wee bit rough." Now, Leslie was the son of a Scottish laird. He married into the famous MacArthur family down in Sydney. Right. He was the first pastoralist on the Darling Downs. He's regarded as the father of stud breeding in Queensland, so he's the stud of the stud breeding.
Wow.
He chose the site of the town of Warwick and, in fact, bought the first block there. He built Newstead House in Brisbane. He represented the district in the first New South Wales Legislative Assembly, and he was a leader of the separation movement on the Darling Downs. But it should be noted that Leslie could be a vigorous opponent, and more than once backed his arguments with his fists. So, Danny, for many reasons, Leslie was another great Queenslander. Now, one more thing on this really slow, dull news day in Ipswich was there was also the announcement that the Ipswich auctioneer, Mr. Gideon Andrew Scott, had got married. Now, Scott had been a well-known grazier who tried his luck on the Queensland goldfields. But from the day he got married in 1857, things went downhill. In 1858, he was in court accused of fraud. In 1859, he was declared insolvent. His wife disappeared from the records. And in 1863, things were so bad that he agreed to work his passage home to Scotland aboard the ship, the Whirlwind. Now, that night, Scott was seen boarding the Whirlwind and was, quote, a good deal worse for liquor. The next morning, his body was seen floating past the ship. So, Danny, that day in 1857... even though Ipswich was described as remarkably dull, you still read about a Dickensian convict, a swearing politician, and an unfortunate auctioneer, and a whole lot more. The Ipswich history is just incredible, then. It's
incredible. What's the name of that bloke that had done all those things? The separation?
Patrick Leslie.
Patrick Leslie. Any of these families still live in Ipswich, I wonder? Patrick Leslie.
Well, it's a big family, so let's hope so, because and not just in Ipswich, but in Warwick, right across the Darling Downs, the whole district.
We should know this man, Patrick Leslie, and we should name a highway after him, the Patrick Leslie Highway.
That would sound pretty good to me.
Now,
he was the second son of a Scottish lad, which means he wasn't the heir, he was the spare, so he missed out on that. So you should get a highway here. Good idea.
Exactly. He's got a tilt in his kilt. Now tell me this. Where do we find this story on Facebook?
Yeah, well, let's go. Well, you can go to Facebook, History Out There, or you can go straight to the source of all good history news, Danny, historyouthere.com, and you can subscribe to all these stories. In fact, this story about that slow news day in dull Ipswich, that'll be online tomorrow morning with all the pictures of these guys. Historyouthere.com, and you can hear you for the second morning in a row.
Oh, my God. That'll make people's mornings. It's 8:18. Harold H. Peacock, he is our resident historian, and he really does give us interesting stories. People love this segment. John O'Hara, my mate, he loves this segment as well. At 8:18 on West Bremer Radio.